Good morning and good afternoon, wherever you may be as you tune in today. And thank you for joining us. I'm Sonia Sapaban, CEO of our office, where we have pioneered an end-to-end solution that includes the proven process, the technology platform, and professional expertise to build a more inclusive workplace. In honor of the International Women's Month this month, we launched the Women and Allies series on March 1st. Really, it's meant to empower women to voice their concerns and needs, and to equip their allies and leaders in the workplace with ideas and tools to address those needs. Since gender equity is a global challenge, which is experienced to varying degrees around the world, we decided to dedicate this first webinar in the series to global perspectives. And where better to start than in France, where there is much to be learned, we think, with over a decade of very serious focus and even quotas for gender equity. We have amazing panel members to discuss this who will introduce themselves shortly and will guide us through the conversation. But first, let's make sure that everybody is aware of the logistics here. Now, I think that we all are used to the Zoom tool, but just in case, this is a Zoom webinar. It's an interactive webinar, so we'll have a few polls throughout to get your inputs as part of the conversation. And also please note the chat function to provide comments. We also welcome questions throughout the webinar that you can put in the Q&A. We will have my colleagues at our office, especially Anushka Sarif, who will be moderating the questions in real time and chiming in as needed. Thanks in advance, Anushka. We will answer as many questions as we can at the end and also throughout if we can, but even afterwards if needed, as long as you provide your email address when you ask your question. Also, please note that this session is being recorded and will be available after the webinar on the events page at ouroffice.io/events. Again, that's our office, no spaces, .io/events. Last but not least, this webinar is approved for SHRM and HRCI recertification credits. You'll find the activity codes on the last slide. So let's get started, shall we? So I want to say a hearty bonjour et bonsoir, since we have our panelists calling directly from Paris. We will ask each one of them to shortly just introduce themselves. And if you would, please just, your name, what you do generally. And we'll start with Isabel. We'll go alphabetical.
Hello, Isabelle Guillot. I'm Transformation Director for Altaria in real estate. I have more than 25 experiences in management transformation and performance, optimized performance in retail, in real estate, and in manufacturing in 7 different companies. And also I have 2 children.
Oh, awesome. What age? What ages are they?
13 and 26.
Oh, wow. Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Isabel, for being here. Let's go to Lamia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lamia, and I am data engineer at Lucky Cars. So it's been 3 years since I've joined the company, and mainly my job is to manage the infrastructure for the data team, to automate all the processes and models developed by data scientists and data analysts. And I also do some other stuff like onboarding, trainings for newcomers, and innovation management. It's been 5 years since I came to France, and my academic path was first done in Algeria with engineering studies, and then I studied 1 year at Grenoble, artificial intelligence, and then big data in the Paris region.
Oh, that's awesome. I love a young lady in STEM. That's awesome. Thank you, Lamia. Mathieu, the only male on this panel, but don't worry about that. And that's not why we put you last, just your name starts with an M. So
so pleased to be with you today. Hi, everybody. So Matthew, I'm 51 and I've been running Lincoln for 22 years. Lincoln is a talent management advisory firm, executive search and leadership advisory. which is kind of a mid-sized company, 150 staff, 2/3 in Europe, 1/3 in Asia. And so we are mostly operating in executive search in different industries.
Thank you very much, Matthew, as well. As you can see, we have a great panel, women in different stages of their careers and also different industries, and also a professional in the hiring and recruitment of people, which is one of the biggest issues today, I think globally to some extent. So with that, we also want to get to know our audience. So shall we do our first poll? What do y'all think about that? Let's just find out where our audience is at. So we'll go to our first poll if we could. And here you see we're asking what stage you think that your organization is at. Now, if you don't know what we mean, here's a little bit of a definition for you to see what we mean. Is your organization, in terms of workplace culture, diversity, equity, and inclusion, do you believe that your organization is aware at this point of the benefits of DEI, ready to focus on making improvements, but not yet quite focused, right? The next one is focus. So they're focused on specific efforts, which are expected to result in improvements. Or you've already done some efforts, and as a result of that, you are now progressive, or you could be world-class as well. Some people say that our organization is unaware, and that option is not on here. I would put unaware in I'm not sure. I think in this day and age, everybody probably has some level of awareness, but that's okay. You could put I'm not sure. Let's see how it's coming in. We have aware about a third, and about 30-40% progressive, and about right now we have about 15% focused. We do have, I think, someone about, in world class, which is amazing. Congratulations. So we'll give that another maybe 10-15 seconds here. Please share where you think your organization is at. Again, aware, focused, progressive, or world class. Or if you don't know, that's okay. All right, so it's really settling about a third aware and a third progressive, with the rest split, across focused and world class. This is a little bit different now, maybe because first this particular webinar is global, and we have companies and people calling in from France. So you see, it's a higher percentage of progressive than we would expect typically. Usually it comes in about a third, somewhere around aware and focused. And so this is a good indication that we actually picked France to start with, because you really are more for the panelists here, your country and the companies in your country are actually more advanced. So let's talk about what some specific data around that. And when we say France is really leading, I know that in France some people may even be surprised by that, but as we look at it from the outside, right? Why do we say that France is really leading in the area, especially of gender equity? It's because France is #1 in the new Equalip barometer. It's been around for a while, and it uses 19 criteria to assess close to about 4,000 publicly listed companies in 23 countries. So it includes obviously, the Fortune 500 in the US, but also the CAC 40 companies, which is the equivalent in France, for example. And after France, which is #1 on this barometer, the other top countries are Spain, Italy, the UK, and Sweden. The countries at the lowest end are Japan, Hong Kong, and the US. So that's why you see we're so impressed in the US with France and those other countries in Europe. And also based on the 2021 annual reports of the CAC 40 companies, women occupy now 44% of the board seats in France. Now we'll talk a little bit about why that is. Of course, we're aware of some quotas and things, but still that is really great progress over the last decade, or a little bit more than a decade. This is compared to about 32% in Germany, and 35% in the UK that are after France. So this is just a little bit of data. I just wanted to get the conversation going. Our panelists are a lot more expert than me, and especially you, Matthew. I know you look at these things very closely with your extensive background in recruiting and also in supporting women in recent years specifically. What do you think are the key factors that contribute to this success in France? And I'll say up front, success doesn't mean it's perfect, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But right now, just let's talk about the good news, right, and the success. What do you attribute that to primarily in France?
Okay, thank you, Sonia. First, as an introduction, I would say that fighting hard for gender equality and for diversity is not so new in France. And for example, we founded with other recruitment firm. We founded an organization to promote diversity and to fight against discrimination already 15 years ago in 2006. So it means that for us, we started very early to fight for gender equality in the recruitment process. And it's something which is very, very strong for all our teams. But this is not the main topic. If I would talk about the three main factors, I would say the first one is probably the academic level of women in France. And I would say that already in the early 70s and 80s, many women achieved quite high graduate level in university, and I would say top business schools. They managed to achieve high rates in a top business school and top engineering school. So it means that and it has extended in the last few years. So it means that the proportion of young graduates who are women are usually the top young graduates in the major business schools and major engineering schools or universities in France. And this is the first topic, that the best young graduates are often women. Then the second one is probably due to our old government policies since the post-Second World War, which are really devoted to family policies. It means that children are going to kindergarten very, very young, and starting from 3 years old, that you have all the subsidies. And as you know, France, we are paying a lot of tax, so we get a lot of subsidies on the other side. So it means that it's easy for women to have some compensation and to have some solution to have their children being taken care by the governmental topics or things. So this is a very important topic about the family policies, which are very helpful for women to work without any break in their career, you know. And the pregnant stop is the pregnancy. Maternity leave is something which is very, very easy, and it's very easy to come back from maternity leave with being warm welcomed in French companies. And the third one, which is a bit more recent, but has been very impactful, and you mentioned it before, are recent laws which have been passed. I mean, the first one was 20 years ago, is about politics, in to be elected in a town council or member of parliament. It's now since 2000. It's 2000. Sorry. It's mandatory to have 50% of candidates who are women for both town council and member of parliament. So this has influenced companies. They say, okay, if politicians are doing it, we have to do the same in companies. And then in 2011, another law has been passed about the gender equality in public companies' boards. So it means, as you say, that 44% of board members are now women. And this has been a big shift. And for us in executive search and recruitment, then we had to to search for women as board members, and it was it was at this time very hard for men to join new boards. You know, it was only for women, and so quotas could be good. And much more recently, so it's December 21, we passed another law, the Rixon law, which is going to impose to all companies, not only public companies, but all companies over 1,000 staff. So it's not so big companies, you know, it's mid-size as well, to have a kind of parity, a gender parity in the executive committee. So it means that, okay, we had many women as managers, as directors, as, you know, in expert roles, but now for the C-suite need to be like 50-50 before between women and male. And I think this is going to be a really, really strong change.
Well, thank you so much for that rundown. You know, I'm encouraged that having more women, you know, coming out of university is helpful, because in the US, we've just surpassed a couple of years ago where there's more women, in fact, graduating from colleges than men. I think, you know, in the spirit of inclusion, I must say that sometimes, you know, some of the quotas that have good results, like you described, you know, we're aware, right, in the spirit of inclusion that, for example, males in this case, you know, might feel like they are paying the price, right? And that is the truth. I mean, we have to confront that, and there's really not much remedy for that. But sometimes there is some, you know, major changes that need to be made, and this happens. But I would say that the interesting thing is sometimes, you know, I've seen boards that, you know, have increased the size of the board overall to accommodate, you know, more women, but not necessarily, you know, so harshly affect, you know, males, for example. But sometimes it's inevitable. And but in a few years, once that balance is reached, then it can go back, right? It's not a permanent thing, right? It's hopefully it's just necessary to course correct, so to speak. But I want to recognize that, because I know, you know, our audience and everybody else that will listen to this later on, you know, that's something that I think is to be recognized, and for your species, you know, males. And but thank you for that overview. Isabella, I know you were not initially in favor of quotas. What do you think now? Do you think they're working, or are there other key factors beyond the factors that Matthew mentioned in terms of the success that you've seen in France?
Yes, at the beginning, I was against it. I thought it was a little bit too feminist, and maybe because I had 4 female directors during my career, supporting me and encouraging me to take new responsibility. But I changed my mind. I realized it's a necessary step to move forward. Of it, create awareness, start the discussion, and launch action. And quota will allow organizations to be focused on metrics and help them to move forward. And in fact, I realized it's like the same as I do in my job. When we do a transformation project, in fact, we start with measure where we are. We build action plan and fixed targets. We start to communicate and to onboard people. And after we finally follow up the success with metrics. So in fact, it's the same than for all change project.
I love that, this idea that, you know, when you focus on any initiative, you know, whether it is to improve safety, quality, you know, or diversity, right? You do have to focus attention on that, and you do have to treat it like any other kind of business, or other aspects of business, and that's where you actually get results. So we've heard a little bit about, you know, these success factors, but let's kind of look at the audience again. Let's engage our audience and see what factors drive the organizations that are represented by our audience today to focus on DEI. So let's have our next poll, please. And so here we're asking, what's the main reason for your organization's interest in gender equity and diversity, equity, and inclusion? Is it primarily driven by the focus of your CEO on the topic that we put that first because that does happen to be a big driver. Are there internal issues? For example, there's sometimes, there's some dissatisfaction, there's some grievances and things going on internally that cause an organization to start focusing on that. Are there external requirements? These could be like the quotas that Mathieu was just talking about. It could be like the NASDAQ diversity rule that's now been approved by the SEC in the United States. It could be just your board, requiring it. We consider the board outside the management, internal to the company. So those could be external requirements. Hiring and retention. We all know that over 80% of everybody, not just people of diverse backgrounds, but everybody, especially with the millennials, that number is really high. But close to 80% of people, when they are considering a new job, they consider inclusion as one of the key factors for their final decision. There could be an internal champion other than the CEO, or there could be other reasons. So this is some of the reasons that we have here. Not surprisingly, hiring and retention is showing as 44% of the reasons driving organizations. That's understandable and a big one. I'm surprised that external requirements and CEO focus are not as big. But internal champion, if we put internal champion and CEO focus together, that's about 18% of the reason. And there's some other reasons, about 18%. Thank you again. We thank everybody who participates in these. This is interesting. And we asked similar questions across our webinars, and then we'll aggregate this data and share it with the community. A lot of what we do is also just learning and sharing and discovering more about how we can move the needle better on gender equity and all aspects of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, so with that, now that we have that understanding, let's go forward. And at this point, Lamia, I do want to ask you, as a data engineer at a fast-growing tech company, can you share your experience? Is there an ally or a leader who has helped your career, or other factors that have helped you personally in your career?
Well, coming to such a question, the first example that comes to my mind is that at the beginning and to this point yet, I was recruited as a data engineer. So I was expected to face huge databases, many processes to automate, purely tech things. And at some point, my manager came and asked me to take in charge the innovation process of the data team, which I wasn't expecting in my missions. I had just to have to run one workshop focused on innovation, organize an event outside of our office, and bring all the team and make something gamified, which would allow to bring new ideas up. And it was such a success that it became a habit. We just set a regular process for innovation, doing the same or a bit different or new workshop every month. And it's been 2 years of working on innovation, and it really brought new ideas, which became real services and products for the company at some point. So yeah, this is one great example where I wasn't expecting a mission, and I discovered that I could do it, and it was maybe more bringing new balance to myself, because I'm a pretty creative person. So having non-tech and tasks and going out of that tech bubble was very helpful to me, and brought improvement to my career.
That's so interesting that not only this was an opportunity for you, but was also really an expansion and growth opportunity on a broader level. Excuse me. And so that's a great story. Thank you so much for sharing that about your ally there. We thank him as well. Mathieu, any anecdotes you have to share from being an ally yourself? Or, I mean, you deal with executives all the time. You're really in a perfect position to have a view to, how allies can help, or other factors that you see in companies and organizations that are really helpful to women's success, especially when you place, executives that are female in roles, in critical roles.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe I could talk about something which was quite a while ago, but it's about hiring a deputy CFO for one of my clients. Was a public company CFO, and one of the talent we introduced, she was a woman, and before going for interview, she just called me and said, "Okay, I just learned that I'm pregnant of twins. So this job is too demanding. I can't take it. I definitely can't take it. It's going to be huge work, and it's a key position in this group. But as I'm going to have some twins, it's not possible." And I said, "Please, it's not the case. You have to go. You're the one, and they need you." But then the CFO, we disclosed it to the CFO, and the CFO said, "No, I don't want to meet her. I don't want to meet her because." Our situation is really critical, and we need someone operational for the next 2 years full time. I said, "Please meet her," and he didn't want. So I had to fight a lot. And I say, "Well, if you don't meet her, I will never work anymore with you, and it's over. We stop."
Wow.
Then he met her, and he understood she was the top one. She was a good one. So they hired her. Then she started a little bit, but then moved on the maternity leave. I had two nice twins. She was, which is not a good thing, and she was already working on a maternity bed just in a clinic. But then now this guy told me, wow, she was the best ever recruitment I've ever done, and she's planned to move to the CFO role of this company very soon, and it has been a really successful one. So the meaning of that is we should never hesitate, whatever the situation, to push, and to convince, and whatever the situation, whatever your personal situation, there's no way we can discriminate. No way we can discriminate.
Well, that's such an inspiring story. I see in the chat someone is also agreeing with us that it's really an inspiring story, and that's sometimes what it takes. I'll tell you, it actually brings a memory for me, because when I started my career after about 2-3 years at a private company, I was approached to work for NASA, and it was an aerospace company. I've been supporting NASA as a contractor, but NASA itself approached me, and I had just found out that I was pregnant with my son, who is now an amazing grown man, of course. So I had to disclose to them. I told them, and they said they didn't blink an eye. I will say the person who was trying, the hiring manager, said, "Oh, well, that's great. It's a 2-for-1." and then I ended up being overdue, by the date that I thought about, a week or so later, after they had told me my due date was. And after I delivered and I was in the hospital, my team at NASA, they sent me a big flower, and on it said, just a typical NASA project, over cost and over schedule. And it was very funny, but it was really amazing. I couldn't imagine myself, moving when I was like 5-6 months pregnant, moving my job. And I didn't have any, because you had to be there for a while before you had vacation and all kinds of things. We're not in the US, we don't have as much, especially back then, as much, leave, parental leave. But they actually advanced me they made some special accommodations to advance me some vacation and so on. So I think, look, I really believe that these kind of conversations are the reason we have them, and the reason they're really helpful is to really give people ideas to be creative, right? It's true that benefits and processes are not perfect, but people are people, right? We can be creative. That's really the great thing about people, is that we have imagination. We can imagine a different process or a different rule, even if it's not the normal of what's in the in the company or in the organization. So in this case, you were very creative. You even threatened to not work with them anymore. And that's really going above and beyond. And my team at NASA was also creative. Anything that Lamia or Isabel, you would like to add on this before we go on to some of the challenges also,
I would go if Isabel allows it. One other thing I would like to share is that take into consideration that having gender equity, for example, is very important in business, actually. So if I take the example of Lucky Card, so first we need to understand that the business of Lucky Card is that retailers such as Carrefour, Intermarché are our customers, and we compute a personalized discount for their shoppers. And overall, half of humanity is female, so half of everything concerns them. And in our case, we have some statistics like 70% of shoppers are female. So if in our data team, which is about 10%, we have a majority of males, and it happens with bad luck. It would happen that none of them is in charge of shopping in their own house. How would they understand the business and have the good intuition to develop the AI that computes our personalized discounts? So it happens we are more lucky than this, and even the male members of our team do their shopping. But this gives an example of how having female members in a data team can leverage the business with better understanding of our shoppers, who are the customers of our customers, and having better intuition to develop better AI algorithms, which is a real concern for data scientists. So yeah, that's it. Your mic is off, Sonia.
See, this happens. This has to happen at least once on any webinar. Somebody that has muted themselves. Thank you for that, Lamia. That's a great point, right? Especially in your business, how important it is to have that diversity, so that that's represented. Those point of views are represented, and especially in AI, right? It's unavoidable. There's going to be more and more AI, when you just don't know what you don't know, right?
Exactly.
So I think that's a big point that you bring up, and we have some input also on chat about that work in fashion, luxury, beauty, tech space. This person is in there, I think, in the launch metrics, and they also find benefit when leveraging the female eye when developing AI for their image and product recognition and tagging. So definitely that's a very big area, right? And there's been both, and I would say, we are, this month is Women's Month, and we're focused on gender equity, but certainly people of color, same thing, right? It's there's a lot to be said about the importance of diversity in all of these areas. So, while we've been talking about the success that France has had and the success factors, I know that all our panelists would agree that the work is far from done. And I'll give just a couple of examples, but over about 500 of the management committee positions that are available in CAC 40, again, that's the equivalent of our Fortune 500, only 20% of these roles, of these 500 or so management committee roles are held by women. And while France requires the publication of the Equality Index, it doesn't require transparency around pay equity. And from what I understand, there is still a persistent gap around 20%, which is similar to the US. This is a 2018 data. I didn't find any more recent data around the pay gap, but it tends to be around that number in the US as well. So there are some challenges, and so Lamia, since you were talking already about the benefits, maybe we'll continue with you. And where do you see as you think of your careers your own career in the 5 years from now. What barriers do you personally think that there might still be for you, or what would really help? What needs to be still done? Even though you seem like in a lucky position at Lucky Card, you're in a lucky position that you have allies and you have a great job. But when you think of the next level, right? There's these ideas of the glass ceiling and all kinds of things. And my personal experience is, as you go higher, it gets more difficult. Because I had a great career, I had a lot of champions, a lot of allies. I was very fortunate, mostly white males. But as I went higher and higher, and some of those allies became competitors, and it was a little bit of a different atmosphere. And as I always say, the glass ceiling comes more into view as you get closer to it. So how do you see as you think that your career?
Well, yeah, I do think the same exactly about being lucky. And unfortunately, we might be all here a part of a lucky minority. So as for my career, I see it like growing exactly the same as the company. We are, like you said, a fast-growing tech company. We're going international. We are getting more customers. So our team is getting bigger. And as one of the eldest members of the team, I might quite well be managing many projects, international projects, and at least one team of data and data engineering in 5 years up from now. But one needs to remember that if we want to have initiatives, women empowerment actions, and laws that are protecting women in their workplace and their career, it needs to be done for the less lucky women, for the ones that are not in this lucky minority. And it mainly goes through education. As Matthew said, the first leveraging is the educational one. And everyone needs to be implied in this, not only government and education ministry. If companies from the ones seeing our webinar today are willing to have strategies on the side of women empowerment, they need to make sure that they provide for example, mentoring for female students, help them go towards STEM specializations, provide learning and experience gaining opportunities. From my point of view, even if not paid, the first important thing is really getting learning and knowledge. And then maybe providing more data over how do they perform with women, how many interns female interns did they get over a year, how many of their female co-workers got a higher position, how much time did it get. So providing this information is important for us, and I'm talking about this from a recruiter point of view. Sometimes we open positions and we really hope to have female candidates so that we would hire them, and we rarely do in data or pure tech positions. And at some point we are so desperate that we just stop and ask, where are all those fresh graduates going? Are they having hard times to get hired elsewhere, or just not getting to our position offers? Or we need this information to have a clearer idea of how to leverage and empower women in their STEM careers.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I think data is really powerful and really helps you pinpoint, because sometimes it's like, well, what do we do, right? So one of in the hiring pipeline, especially, we have this experience. I can share one from one of our customers where, our platform has key performance indicators, KPIs across the hiring pipeline, right? And they were wondering, how come they're not getting, more ability to hire more, women and people of color in general. And as we looked at the pipeline, they were focused on the sourcing. And it turned out, as we looked at data on the whole hiring pipeline, that the sourcing could be improved, but it wasn't the biggest issue. The biggest issue was, as you looked at it, there was a big drop off between the sourcing, where people first, the initial candidates, and then as they went through the interview process, there was a bottleneck at some point where they weren't, taken forward at some point. And so it ended up being, the outcomes were not so good. So they looked at the interview process. They learned that they should, there's some practices, right? Like having a mixed interview panel, having the interviewer, because a lot of times people talk about the interview slate being diverse, but the interviewer slate, who is on the other side of the table, from the company side, interviewing. If a candidate comes in and it wasn't only the company side, from the applicant side, sometimes as they started after the first interview, they didn't show up for the rest of the interviews because they saw that the interview panel was all, just didn't look like them. And they decided to not continue with the company. I think you make a really good point about pinpointing where the issue is, or in terms of internal progress and development. We found another instance, again, you have to look at a lot of different data points, right? Most companies only look at compensation gap and representation, if that, right? At least in the US. I know that there's some requirements in some countries like yourself, but that's not enough. So we have some of our customers, there's one case, for example, they wanted more middle management diversity, and it was hard for them to do. And as they looked at it, they saw that, especially since we're talking about women today, they looked at gender diversity in terms of performance ratings and promotions. And when they looked at performance ratings, they saw that 60% of their exceeds expectations rating, which was the highest rating, was women. But then when they looked at promotions, only 30% of the promotions, of all promotions, were women. So there was, this is unconscious bias probably, right? The same managers that are giving very high grades, they're giving them exceed expectations. When it comes to promotion time, it's unconscious. It's not that people are trying to do this. And the reason I say this, the reason it's proven to us that it's an unconscious bias, is as soon as this data became available to them, and they just had awareness of it, nobody had to give them any, in this case, requirement or a quota, because it was their performance process was ongoing at the time. But this awareness caused, right after that, about 3 months later, when they looked at the data, their middle management ratio of women had gone up by 4%, which was quite large for where they started out. It was quite low at the beginning. So they were shocked and amazed, but that was because people became aware of this issue, and on their own, they started taking actions to correct that. So thank you for that, for sharing, how important data is. I want to ask us, bring Isabel back in. I know that you're worried about the representation gap that still persists in companies, despite the high percentage of women who are graduating in all fields, including STEM, like your own daughter graduating from McGill University in Canada. What do you think are the barriers that persist, that cause that? And how do you think it hopefully will change over the next 5 years or not?
Yes, I think the barrier is that the woman had too many questions, and the barrier is that she refusing a job because they immediately think about logistic and marital load, and they need probably to be encouraged, support to take the new opportunity. And it was happened for me with my boss. And I think that they are sure that they can find the balance between the personal and private life. And moreover, with this period of COVID, with this pandemic, we see again women took more domestic load, and some continue to do some school at home. So I think in France we are lucky because school is mandatory, and we are lucky women can go back to work and find a new balance. But I would say that over the next year, I'm confident, thanks to the benefits of the quota, thanks of all the initiative we see now. I think the men are more involved, and the new generation also are educated differently. And so, but we still have a key role to help them. I see, I have some young women, young for 30-year-old, and they came to me and ask me, do I take this new job? Should I have a kid before? What should I do? And I think it's a pity. Kids are not a barrier. They are just a joy of life. So we should have choose. We don't have to say, I will work, start my career, and after have a job, have a kid, etc. So we need to help to hit them, to support them, like Mathieu explained before, or speak with them, encourage them that they find their balance. And also employer needs to discuss with the female employees to help them to solve to solve the situation and take the job.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, and the chat, we had some comments about what else can people, can especially leaders and allies do, and what can other women do. I had my own experience. I had a young woman who was very, very capable. I jumped her, kind of like promoted her very quickly, in 2-3 steps. And every time, even my executive, my EA, my assistant knew, every time that she came and made an appointment to talk to me, she came to me and said, are you trying to promote her again? Because she knew that she's coming to argue against it, because she thought she was being promoted too fast. And the first time she told me this, I told her the story of myself and, being a mother and a single mother and how I did it. And it's really doable. And I could say it. The second time she came, I talked to her some more. The third time she came, I said, you know what? I'm starting to be insulted by you because you're apparently not respecting my judgment enough, that every time I try to promote you, you come and you try and, talk against it, because I also was aware of her personal situation and everything. And I said, you can really do this. But it really took that. As soon as I did that, it wasn't really hard. She just needed that affirmation, because women's life, some women, as they're not as lucky as Lamia was saying, perhaps that don't have the family support, maybe don't have a stay-at-home partner, or someone to help them. They have these questions, and that's just part of being a woman. You have these responsibilities at the end of the day that you feel differently towards. Maybe, I'm not saying that dads do too. I mean, I think parental leave for males, I mean, here in the US especially, we've been talking a lot about that, because it's not fair to think of it as, just maternal leave, right? It should really be parental, including both moms and dads. So I think that's all. People find themselves in different situations and should be supported. But it just so happens that women at a certain age, especially in the 30s, late 20s and early 30s and mid 30s, need that support to kind of, when they have that hard decision to make. But as we think about all of these challenges, and we're going to continue this conversation a little bit more, let's also find out about, from our audience, what challenges do they see that are typically, ones that they see that have to be dealt with in improving, gender equity. Is it largely an issue of limited resources, budget, experienced staff to do some of the great things that we're talking about, managing, or could it be that there's some budget, but it's really, how do you manage the effort? How do you manage with that budget, to improve the situation? Sometimes people say, well, we're doing some things, but we don't know if it's making any, we're making any progress. We don't know what to measure. It could also be that it's just, they don't know what women really need. Is it, maybe that's one of the barriers. And then the other one is engaging the whole organization in these efforts, because it can't just be an HR, an HR thing. It's also sometimes selling the business case. People might say, yeah, we're for gender equity, but we have other priorities. Why should this be a higher priority? So there has to be a business case for it too. Or it could be that it's improving around the brand, that the organization has a challenge around the brand. So which of these challenges is a bigger challenge for the organizations? I think that very clearly engaging the whole organization in the effort is coming out as about 67% are saying that that's really a big issue. Managing the effort and having the budget, of course, those are coming in at about 25% each. And then the brand, of course, is a challenge for companies that don't have a great brand around this. It's not differentiated enough, and it's hard for them to attract women. So again, okay, thank you very much for your contributions here from the audience. It seems like engaging the whole organization is a big one there. So just continuing this conversation for a moment then, Matthew, what about you from your professional perspective in the recruiting area? What are some, you talked about the new laws a little bit, but how do you see the next 5 years, as these new laws are just coming online? See, is it going to be getting better, more laws even, or over time, maybe there's not as many laws required anymore? And just the situation, we talked about the pay gap, we talked about, the gap in terms of women in executive roles, now that the board is so, is doing so well.
Yes, thank you. Well, first I say I'm very aligned with all that Lamia and Isabel have mentioned. So we are all, I think, aligned on the same position. But talking about how I see the next 5 years, well, as I mentioned before, this new law about gender parity in executive committee in the C-suite for all the over 1,000 staff companies, but also, as you mentioned, Sonia, the gender equality index, which is now disclosed and which is something in which companies are very, very cautious and will pay a lot of attention. I'm very optimistic for the next 5 years, as it happens at a time that on the younger position, like more junior managers and so on, we have moved to more equality, more gender equality. So this is going to raise automatically to the C and D positions, to the C-suite and the D-suite. So and even so, I mean, talking for the white collar again, for all the professionals, executives. If coming back to the pay discrimination, I would say for the low qualified or for the low qualified workers, because of women accept more part-time jobs, more part-time position. We still face kind of huge difference between men and women salaries, annual package, and we still have to fight. And I'm not yet very optimistic on this one, because we need to work very hard, specifically on services job, where women are working part-time, and this is something we have to keep fighting. But coming back to the white collars, I'm very optimistic, and things have been accelerating so fast in the recent months that on the 8th of March, the Women's Day, some of my colleagues, and even if they were women consultants, they were telling me that they are scared for men, because if you're now a 40-year-old professional manager, it's going to be much more tough to reach the C-suite, much more difficult to get to the executive committee, as all our clients are putting so much priorities on women that we start to be a bit scared for men, and we don't want to get into a kind of gender war, because men start to be a kind of a sailing, as they say, okay, and some told me as well, they said, okay, I'm 40, 50 years old, I'm a man, and I'm from the same nationality of my company, so I have no chance to reach the C-suite. So this is something, so it's the other side of the coin, but it's also a kind of strong outcome. It means that things are moving for women, and maybe too fast. So maybe we can hope that within 5 years, we'll be able to really stop this quota policy and to come back to a normal life, which will be much more balanced without any quota. So that's my kind of optimistic point for that. Yeah.
Yes, I think that is a point that is really worth consideration, is not to disenfranchise, again, in the name of inclusion, right? What is currently the majority. And I really like how you put that this pay gaps, and I believe with you the same in the US, that the pay gap, a lot of it is structural in terms of, how many, when you think about average, although in equivalent jobs, of course, there is a pay gap as well. So some component is that, but not all of it. Some component of it also is when we talk about women in general and how women's pay compares with males. Some of it is structural jobs, and just even if you have, like, for example, 2 or 3 VPs, at the same level, sometimes I tell women all the time, try and have P&L jobs, try and have, because those jobs pay more when you're responsible for profit and loss versus, functional roles, which a lot of times women are put in those jobs. And I was just fortunate, I was in functional roles. I didn't know the difference, but at some point, I was really good with the customers, and they're like, well, you'll be good at making more money for us, so we'll put you in a P&L role. And so that's how I ended up, going through that route. But initially I had large organizations, functional organizations I was responsible for. And that's something that, women need to be aware, and leaders need to be aware. This has been a great conversation. Let me just see, I do want to share just briefly, what the, because I know a lot of people are here and thinking, well, what's next after this webinar? We'll have a couple of minutes left to come back and maybe have couple of last words here, but I do want to share that we do have a survey ongoing on the state of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion in 2022. It is focused on all size companies. It's usually these surveys are only for big companies, but this is really for small and medium companies as well. And you can also get it, if you're interested how you take diversity, equity, and inclusion to the next level, you can get a complimentary session with our D&I advisors that are always available. You can, we actually have French speaking as well. Caroline, who we've had here, is Caroline at ouroffice.io is her email. She is French. She's a key member of our team. And you can also mention, that you were on this our office webinars. The next thing that I want to make sure that we put up here is also the recertification credits that you can have. These are the codes. We'll leave this up for a moment. And as we do that, I think, there were some questions around still, what can allies do more and other women can do. Let me just ask you each to take maybe 30 seconds each and talk to, if you were going to leave the audience with one thing that they can do, whether it's for a woman, you can either say, for what can a woman do themselves, but also the allies and the leaders to move things forward, just something that any individual can do, not that they have to have their company necessarily do it, but they can individually themselves do as they leave this webinar in a couple of minutes. So in no particular order, I guess whoever wants to go first.
All right. Please go, Isabel. Please go, Isabel. Go.
I would say, I think we have to engage. I discovered that I have also to engage myself, to speak up also. The women's side are fragile, and we have to still go on, and we don't want this a war, like said Mathieu. So we need to be present. And for my example, I participate to new initiative. I have friends who open a new initiative. One created a new company. Yes, we are to promote, to help women to find their way. And another one create a circle of females in the real estate to call the 17%. To share experience and help each other. So I think we can do things at our level and for sure support and encourage the young generation.
I like that. It's organized, right? Women should organize together also, yes, and help each other. Lamia, do you have one to say really quickly? 30 seconds. Or actually 10 seconds now.
All levels can empower and provide help for women. So if you do not own a company, you are a capable person, and you can, for example, mentor younger ladies and help them acquire knowledge and experience, help them have good orientation towards STEMs, have better education, and act as a citizen, simply. All actors in a society need to go on that same path and enforce law to protect the less lucky women.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Mathieu, last word?
Yeah, I just say as allies, let's encourage women to be bold, to lead the world. And you're going to lead the world, so let's be bold.
Thank you so much. We'll have to leave it there. It's been an incredible conversation, as I thought it would be. I could talk to you another hour or so. I'm sure our audience would too. But we have to leave it here. Thank you so much, everyone. And please tune in for our next webinar. We always have these interesting conversations, and share your thoughts and ideas with us as well. Thank you so much, all. Bye-bye.
Thank
you,
you.
Sonia.
Bye-bye.